As many of you know, us Big Blend Radio hosts Nancy and Lisa have been traveling the country full-time on a quest to visit all of America's parks, public lands, and also share the stories of the communities that we visit and experience. And, you know, it's really interesting. We started this tour years ago, and we had some places where we stopped for a while, but you know, the name John C. Fremont, General John C. Fremont, keeps popping up everywhere we go. San Benito County in Central California, just outside Pinnacles National Park in the historic community of San Juan Bautista, there is Fremont Peak State Park named after him. He actually, also where we used to live in the mountains in San Diego, just outside Julian, is San Pasqual Valley. A lot of you will know that because of the Wild Animal Park out there. There's actually a battle. There's a famous battle that took place there and a monument there. And, of course, that touches back into John C. Fremont. And then we're here now today in Florence, Colorado. It's a historic community, actually the very first place to have oil west of the Mississippi. And it was a bustling community. But it's also right near the Arkansas River and a park. One of the local parks here is called the Pathfinder Park, and it's got this giant statue. Nancy and I drive through into town, and we're like, who's that big dude, you know? And next thing you know, here it is. It's John C. Fremont again, and talking about him and his relationship with Kit Carson and how he mapped the Arkansas River. So mid-July, Nancy and I are scheduled to actually follow the Arkansas River from the headwaters to Little Rock and to where it actually dumps itself into the Mississippi River. So John C. Fremont's not going away. We also, wasn't it Nancy in Greeley, Colorado, the historian at the museum mentioned John C. Fremont again. He likes the forts.
He just keeps popping up. He's like, he was all over. He really was
everywhere.
All over the place.
Well, so this brings our segment today with Mike Guardia, Military Mike. He assigned us to a Love Your Parks Tour Mission Possible Story series and following in the footsteps of generals. We're finding all kinds of generals. We talked about General Grant and Sherman. Both of them have their own sequoia trees named after them in Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks in California. And guess what? General Grant comes back into here too in the story of Fremont as well. So this all ties together. Mike is the author of over 10 books, including Hal Moore, A Soldier Once and Always, American Guerrilla, The Forgotten Heroics of Russell W. Volkman, Shadow Commander, The Epic Story of Donald D. Blackburn, The Fires of Babylon, Eagle Troop, and the Battle of 73 Easting. Hal Moore on leadership, winning when outgunned and outnumbered. Crusader, General Don's story and the army of his times, and his latest book is Hal Moore, A Life in Pictures. All of them are on Amazon. You can also go to his website, markguardia.com. We're happy to have him as one of our experts on Big Blend Radio and in Big Blend Radio and TV Magazine. And joining us on these special Love Your Parks Tour Mission Possible stories on following in the footsteps of generals, not only the generals he's written for, but also the generals we keep bumping into on our adventure. So welcome back, Military Mike. How are you?
Hey, Lisa. Hey, Nancy. It's great to be on the show, as always.
Yeah. Hey, do all these generals know each other? I mean, how does, General Grant, bumps into John C. Fremont. Abraham Lincoln is everywhere we're going for some reason. He pops up everywhere. I understand how he's a president and very popular, but these characters, I hate to say characters, but I feel like we're stepping into their stories everywhere we go. It's pretty wild, John C. Fremont being everywhere that we've been. And also, he was the governor of Arizona, our home state. So there we go.
Absolutely.
I think he's done Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say that the Army looks big from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking out, it's a pretty small community, and it really has been for, I think, decades and even centuries. So, going back to your earlier question, all of those generals, they all knew each other, and sometimes they got along. Most of the time they didn't. They had competing views, they had competing personalities, and some of them, on occasion, engaged in, the little games of one-upmanship, of trying to prove I'm tougher than you are or I'm smarter than you are. But, I guess that's par for the course. Anytime you have a small community that's run by people who are qualitatively type A personalities.
That's right. And So he was born January 21st, 1813. He died in July 13th, 1890. His story is huge, and he should have his own movie. And I think, Mike, you should write his story. I'm just saying, it'd have to be like the encyclopedia of John-C-Fremont's life. But he really packed a lot in there. Some people think he was an incredible general. Some people think he was an opportunist. But then you look at how much he's done, it's pretty amazing. One thing that he was the first candidate of the Republican Party to run for office of the President of the United States. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
He ran, yeah, and so he was the first candidate, the very first one to run.
He was, and I really think that Fremont was a lot of those things that you just said. I mean, he was a little bit of an opportunist. He was a little bit of a genius. He was a little bit of an adventurer. Laundry list of contradictions when you look at that guy. And I think when you take a look at some of the most colorful people in history, they all have a bunch of competing qualities. Some seem to negate the others, but sooner or later they find themselves in the right time at the right place where whatever quality of theirs suits the situation really comes out in full force. Because, Fremont, I think he was every bit a hero as much as he was an opportunist. And, his contradictory personality at times produced great success, and at other times it led to his downfall. And,
wow.
It really makes for an interesting character study, and I think any psychologist out there would have a field day just trying to deconstruct what it was that actually made that guy tick.
It seems like he was great as an explorer, and maybe he should have just stuck there and not gone into government or politics or being a general or anything like that. Seems like he could have just stuck out there in the bush and made maps, and he seemed successful there. But as soon as he got into where maybe he had to take orders from somebody else on a regular basis, it kind of rubbed him the wrong way.
It did. And, he was one of the he was really one of the military officers where he had a very visceral understanding and a very visceral concept of what was right and what was wrong. And if he got an order that went contra to whatever he felt deep down in his gut, he would try to find a way to skirt around it. And that's actually what led to his relief, not once but twice. Probably the most notable was during the outset of the Civil War. And here's where Fremont's this is where his pioneering spirit really made him the right person to be in the right job at the right time. Because his map making expeditions to that point, he'd had 4 of them, most of which occurred throughout the 1840s. But that pioneer spirit, as well as the heroism that he displayed in the Mexican-American War, really prompted President Lincoln to, call him back into Union service and say, hey, John, we really need you. I know you're a little rough around the edges, so to speak, but I'm essentially going to give you a carte blanche to do whatever it is you feel necessary to take care of this problem that we have out in the West, particularly out in Missouri. Because Missouri was, probably ground zero for some of the worst things that happened during the Civil War. You had a state that was technically under Union control, but the loyalties were fiercely divided. It was still technically a slave state, so you had a good portion of the population that had a vested interest in the Confederate cause, but you had a seated government at the time that was trying to keep their support to the Union. So he essentially appoints Fremont to be the hand of God and wipe the slate clean in Missouri. Wow. And he almost succeeds. And at first he almost succeeds. He executes some brilliant maneuvers and shows some very intuitive leadership at the First Battle of Springfield. Is able to take Springfield from Confederate forces, but he very quickly loses the confidence of President Lincoln when he gets creative and says, well, gosh, here I am, the head honcho in charge of the Union Army's Department of the West. I got free reign over the state of Missouri. You know what? I'm going to not only declare martial law, but I'm going to issue my own Emancipation Proclamation here inside the state of Missouri. And I'm going to say that every slave owner here in Missouri, whether you're a Union citizen or not, hey, you don't have your slaves anymore, and I'm going to muster them into Union service.
Wow.
Well, the creativity in that regard was not greatly appreciated by President Lincoln, and Lincoln ended up firing him. And Fremont, ever the flippant man that he was, essentially gave a dignified version of the middle finger to our commander-in-chief and said, well, you know what? I'm glad you're firing me because you people don't know how to run a war anyway.
Wow.
And he
Funny.
very quietly went back to his private life, but his private life really didn't last too long because the political pressure from the Union politicians at that time really turned the screws to Lincoln to put Fremont back in charge of a command, saying, hey, this guy actually was doing good things for us. He gave us a victory at the battle of at the first Battle of Springfield, which was the only Union victory in the West in 1861. Abe, I really think you made a mistake. You really need to call him back and give him something.
Wow.
So he reinstated Fremont 1862, right around the start of Stonewall Jackson's campaign in the Shenandoah Valley. And the Shenandoah Valley was, for lack of a better term, it was a disaster for the Union Army. I mean, it was a decisive Confederate victory. And unfortunately, Fremont found himself on the losing end during two particular battles that happened during the Shenandoah campaign. In particular,
didn't Lincoln kick him out? Didn't Lincoln kick him out of that? Yeah, the second time, because he tried to go back in after Jackson, and he'd won, lost, and then But that battle, I didn't realize we had so many Germans on our side, on the Union side. I'm starting to see that more and more in history, that a lot of Germans were hanging out and helping the Union. I had no idea about that, and going against, it was on the Civil War side, I should say. So that was interesting to me. But it obviously, Lincoln went at him again. It's like, I'm going to get you again, no matter what.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Yeah, so 1862 wasn't really a good year for Fremont. He was part of the command leadership that unfortunately was on the losing side at the battles of Cross Keys and Port Republic. And shortly after the Army of Virginia was formed, Fremont actually resigned his commission in 1864 and became a presidential candidate that year for a startup party called the Radical Democracy Party. And it was a splinter party that, of course, didn't go anywhere in the Electoral College, but was enough of a splinter faction to get recognition on a national basis. And it was really just the last hurrah in what was Fremont's long life of radicalism and activism, and really just a very colorful, somewhat flamboyant personality.
What do you think with his wife? Because his wife wrote like the expeditions, and so it's portrayed that they fell in love. And Thomas Benton, his wife's dad, didn't he help fund his expeditions? And so that's part of where that opportunist part comes in. Some of the historians were like, did he really hook up with Jessie, his wife, future wife, for the money for the expeditions, or was it true love? And then apparently on the expeditions, he didn't want to write up everything that he charted and did. And she is the one who wrote the expedition reports and eventually became a well-known author. So I wonder about that relationship.
Well, I think it was. I think here again you have a mixed bag. I think love certainly was a factor. Given that this is the 19th century and the 1800s sentiment at the time was more geared towards true love than I think is prevalent today. So I do think that true love was a factor. I just don't think it was the only factor. I think Fremont saw this as kind of a 2-for-1 deal. Hey, lucky me, I'm in love with this girl who's very easy on the eyes, and my goodness, her dad's loaded. So this is a financial windfall for me as well.
And she can write.
Yeah, and she can write. So I think in some ways she kind of tempered the extravagance that he portrayed in his public persona. Now, I don't have enough information on how Jessie was in her private life, but I just think that she was in some ways it was the traditional marriage where you had the wife fulfilling the role of logistical support while the husband was the one who was doing most of the action and the let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? He's out in the field doing most of the daring do. Yeah, he was the one executing most of the daring do, while she was the one who was organizing it and putting it into a marketable format for the writing market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's actually a pretty good couple when you think about it. Yes, it's not like she just took care of the kids and he went off and did his thing. They kind of worked together on specific goals. It appears that way anyway. Right. It's hard to tell because there's some information about him, but because we weren't there, you just have to hope that what you're reading is totally accurate, and it's all over the place when people talk about him.
I find him interesting about when he was in California, because there was the Mexican-American War, but then things changed, and he led a couple of those battles. First was what is now Fremont Peak, or Fremont, as you say, Mike. I should get it correct. He's got that little dashy-do on his E, on Fremont.
Right.
I just remember, I know about it, because it was Fremont's Peak where everybody kept going, you've got to go to Fremont's Peak. And what's interesting about this mountain range, a friend of ours actually hikes it all the time. Jim Ostick, he goes up there and, you can see Monterey, you can see the ocean from there in the Gabilan mountain range on clear days. And this area is used, and it has an observatory. So it's a history of, actually here's your astrology and, astronomy, astrology. Yeah, we're going to tell you your horoscope now too. But it's interesting. But that is where he kind of did like a little ambush attack. And then I think he did it again in San Pasqual down, further in Southern California. He did these little ambushes up where people wouldn't think that you would go to jump out and attack. So he kind of had that little rogue ambushy thing going on in the military from what I've been reading.
Yeah, he sure did. He was he was a man who sees the opportunity, and for better or for worse, a lot of times he just threw caution to the wind.
And he's how the California Column, or I should say the battalion, I always think about the California Column, he was part of forming that. But then also that's where the flag of California comes from with the bear on it. That's where he apparently helped put that in place. But I didn't know this either, that he got into the gold rush and he became quite wealthy. It didn't last, but he became quite a wealthy dude.
Right.
Over the gold.
He sure did.
Wow, this is amazing. So all these different expeditions, it's kind of like Lewis. He was like a Lewis and Clark. When you think back to, what they were doing and, going up and down the river. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of him as we go. But then it's going to happen, when we get back east too, with the Civil War side of things, being able to, I don't think there's a part of this country he hasn't been almost with his travels and also fighting, Would you ever consider writing about him, Mike?
He's had a few biographers do some sketches on him, so I don't know if me writing about him would contribute anything new, but I would love to write his story just for the sake of telling a story of a man who did some pretty incredible things and just lived life as a modern day rogue and a modern day adventurer, the likes of which you don't really see anymore. And I think given where we are in history, you really wouldn't see anymore, because there's really no more frontier, and there's no internal discord yet. I mean, knock on wood, no internal discord yet that would precipitate another civil war.
Right. I hope not.
Yeah.
And he traveled a lot with Kit Carson. That was his right-hand man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole other cool thing to do when we were in. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that actually makes you think twice about him, because people like Kit Carson, so it's like, why would he hang out with this other guy that maybe people are looking at him like, he's a bit of a control freak. He seems a little bit radical and does whatever he wants. Even if he's told by the president, don't do that, he's like, oh, yeah, watch this. So it makes you wonder about Kit Carson a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think he and Kit Carson were kindred spirits in as much as they both had that pioneering spirit. Kit Carson, of course, I think was far more measured and far more able to exercise restraint in his behavior than John-C-Fremont. But I've noticed that I've noticed in several endeavors that I've been in that people who have recognizable counterpoints in their personality can work together and use those similarities that they have to accomplish great things, even if that's the only thing that they have in common.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So and you see stuff like that again in military history. I mean, if you take for instance Omar Bradley and George Patton in World War II. On the one side you have George Patton, who was very gruff and very bombastic, and was every bit the stereotypical alpha male on the one hand, and then you have him working in tandem with an incredible partnership and incredible synergy with Omar Bradley, who was very quiet, who was very measured, who was, by every standard, I'll almost say the stereotypical officer and a gentleman. I mean, two completely different personalities, and they worked together to, roll the Nazis back in one campaign after another on mainland Europe.
Yeah, it's about keeping what's your goal, what's your end goal.
Yeah.
And what can you unite on? You can't, be all connected. So they did have children. So there's also that history, but it's when you think about, he goes into all these ambushes and going after Stonewall Jackson. The generals we've talked about before with you, Mike, they've gone to West Point or they've had all this military training. Did he just end up in the military and fighting and just knowing how to do how to use a gun and cannons and things like that from his expeditions, or did he? Do you know if he actually went to like a military school?
Well, you have to consider that back in the 1800s, it was a bit easier to get a commission, and it was a bit easier to get into the military than it is today. West Point wasn't the only game in town back then, and I mean it's certainly not the only game in town now. But there were a handful of men. Well, actually, I should say more than a handful. There were several men who had experience with hunting and trapping, and had experience fighting the Native Americans. If not within an official Indian war, then just in various skirmishes on the frontiers, who were able to apply for direct commissions, or who were given special appointments by state governors, or were even given brevet commissions by various field commanders. And you had several great officers, several great men in military history have their entry into the military through that way. And John-C-Fremont was one of those men. He was a man who had some formal education, but the bulk of his education happened in the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, I think because at that time too, when a civil war breaks out, like everybody gets in, that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, the men go off, whether or not you've been to any kind of schooling for it. One thing I just saw now, John-C-Fremont Jr. was born in San Francisco on April 19th, 1851. Apparently, he served in the Navy, and he attained the rank of Rear Admiral, and he also served as commander on the USS Florida, and he was a naval attaché to Paris and St. Petersburg, commander of the battleship USS Mississippi, and finally commandant as the Boston Navy Yard. How about that? So one of his sons went off and did all this military, that was his life, was the military in the Navy. So, and Nancy, I just found this. John-Fremont's Arizona house is actually on the grounds of the Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona, where we were.
Been to. Yes.
Yeah.
How about that?
We should have gone. We need to go back there now and go see his house.
Well, it's one of those people that unless you really, really study, he's kind of there, but he kind of isn't. You don't. And the only reason, when we saw this huge sculpture at a park here, there was Fremont, and we're like, wow, that's that dude, And it came as a kind of a surprise. And then when you start reading, you realize just how much he has done. He just sounds to me like he was very hot-headed and kind of would do whatever he wanted regardless of what he was supposed to be doing or told to do. So he obviously would like to give orders and not take them. That's kind of how he comes across from the things that I've read, but people do have different opinions about him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, most great people in history, I've noticed they tend to be a bit polarizing, probably more than they should be. You have because I think a lot of the most interesting people who have made their mark on history just have so many contradictions, and it's so easy to find evidence that supports one view or another. And Fremont is definitely one of those people. I not that I'm an expert at all on clinical psychology, but I don't think that he is. I don't think that he fits the clinical definition of a narcissist. But you see some narcissistic type qualities come out here and there, and it really just adds to the depth of the character study.
Yeah, I wonder about the communication process during these times. We have email and texting and all this, new technology where communication can be instant if you want it to be. But back then, how long did he have to wait to get a decision from President Lincoln? Maybe he just felt it took too long. I mean, they probably, it's like, I know they had telegraph, but maybe he just felt like things moved too slow, and he's just one of those got to move on a lot faster than the people around him.
Right, and that's actually something. Nancy, I'm glad you touched on that because that's something that military leaders at every level, even today, wrestle with. Even in today's world where we have instant communications, where we have high-tech, high-speed internet and, texting and communication that's as close to real-time as you can get, nobody really knows the situation better than someone who is on the ground at ground zero watching everything happen right in front of him. So it makes it very hard for any leader, I think, in any situation, any organization, to follow guidance from several echelons above, strictly to the T, strictly to the letter, when situations on the ground can change instantly. And I really feel for a lot of the leaders who fought in these conflicts from centuries and even decades past where that wasn't possible. And I truly think that is something Fremont had to contend with, because you had the telegraph, which was about as close to instant communication as you could get back then. But by and large, the most effective way to send communications and not have them be intercepted from a competing telegraph or what have you would be to send runners and to have way stations, along predetermined routes. And that could take, if you were lucky, that could take a week to get to you. And, by the time that order gets to you, the situation on the ground dictates something completely different. I think it's a travesty, really, that wasn't more of a consideration in times past. And I think if it had been, probably some of our more hard-charging and more colorful leaders might not have been relieved under the circumstances that they were.
Wow. That's interesting about that.
I was reading this one account where the person who wrote this said that Fremont was avoiding, he knew that Lincoln was going to fire him, so he just purposely made it so messages couldn't get through to him, because he felt like if he got that message, he'd have to obey. But if he didn't, then he wouldn't. So he kind of pretended there was an imminent battle, which history says there most likely wasn't, so that he could tighten ranks and not let messengers get through. Now, I don't know how true this account is, because I wasn't there, but apparently the man who got through dressed up as a farmer instead of dressing as somebody from the military, and he was able to get through and deliver the message that Fremont was fired. But it's funny, because I don't know how true that is, because I really don't. But it's an interesting take on the lack of ability to have an instant message, and then do what you're told, especially if you're going to get fired. It's like, okay, I just won't open that envelope. How about that?
I think Ken Burns better do a documentary on this. I want to see people running through, That reminds me of, there's this joke going around on Facebook where two birds are looking at what appears to be a scarecrow, and one says, no, it is a scarecrow. And they're like, how do you know? Well, it doesn't have a phone in the hand. So it's kind of that interesting thing with, the farmer running through the field, like, get that message, Meantime, it's not a farmer. Yeah, when you think about history, you have to make those decisions, and it happens in business. You have to make a decision. I remember I had a boss once who said to me, make a decision and beg for forgiveness later if you're wrong. And I sometimes feel that's what you have to do, is you can't wait for 10 years to make a decision, not in battle. And, battle gets dirty, and battle there's a creative part of that, on how to get at your opponent. So, I think he was into that part of it. So we're going to make a map of Fremont. We'll get this stuck in our head and start saying his name correctly. Of all the places we go, we'll take a photo of any kind of historical marker. Unfortunately, we've been to places like San Pasqual. We'll have to go back to Julia and Nancy to do that. But we'll do like a Fremont map, so we can mark all the places that we go on the tour with him on there, because that would be cool for people to see and follow the Pathfinder. What, excuse me, what I do find interesting, Mike, we were just in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Talk about military history there. My gosh. And we were in a hotel called the La Fonda on the plaza, an incredible hotel with so much history. And the artwork in there was commissioned. The Harvey House had this whole thing about doing real art and showcase the history and the Native American culture. And they commissioned this one artist to do these 10 paintings to, basically use as postcards. And the one painting is of Kit Carson. And Nancy and I were looking at the painting of Kit Carson. We're like, man, they're following us everywhere. But at the title of the painting was The Pathfinder. So there's a side of me that wonders, like, did he take Kit Carson's nickname somewhere along the line? So there's all these weird little things. I mean, now it's a car, but It's I wonder how that happened. If Kit Carson had the name The-Pathfinder at one point. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Pathfinder was a popular nickname that a lot of cartographers gave to themselves. They
Oh.
they for better or for worse. I mean, regardless of whatever success they had in blazing trails or making maps or making topographical representations of the American frontier, a lot of them fancied themselves with the title of Pathfinder, and that spirit, in a sense, actually lives on today. Some of your listeners might know that the Army actually has a school called Pathfinder School, and the whole basis of that course is to train soldiers of practically any occupational specialty to be able to blaze trails and find and create helicopter landing zones.
Oh, wow. Wow. Does laser work get into this now in these days, like looking at things aerially and using like a laser technology?
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah, like laser technology. I know that some of the historical parks that we're going to where they have ruins, they're using some kind of laser technology that maps things what's underground, and they're able to see what to do. So I was wondering if if the Army and the military are doing that kind of thing too when they make maps.
Well, I can say for sure that we have laser guided munitions. As far as laser integrated topography, it wouldn't surprise me if we did, but I don't know for sure if we do. But that would certainly be interesting to find out.
Yeah. I think this whole laser thing is neat, that you can find, graves, you can find other buildings. That's how they found the Easter Island statues, those big heads, the other part of them. And they, it's really fascinating stuff, what you can find. So, man, Military Mike, this is, good conversations here. I'm enjoying learning about all these generals. And last time it was all about war crimes. So thank you for joining us again. The one thing I wanted to touch on before you go is another book is coming out, right? Or is it two coming out this year?
Actually, it is 3.
Oh, my gosh. What happens in between times when we don't talk? He writes another book.
The ideas just keep on coming. So I'm not quite sure what I touched on in our last interview, but what is on the horizon for the rest of 2019 and into the spring and summer of 2020. And actually, I take that back. Now that I think about it, there are 4 titles on the horizon.
Oh my gosh!
The first, the first one, I think I mentioned previously. It's the latest installment for the Casemate Illustrated series, and that is called American Armor in the Pacific. And it looks at the Sherman tank and its role on some of the island battles in the Pacific theater of World War II, on places like Tarawa and Iwo Jima. And then coming out earlier this fall is a book called Tomcat Fury, and that is a combat history of the F-14 fighter jet. And in a similar vein, one of the 2020 titles is a book called Wings of Fire, combat history of the F-15. And then in between those 2 titles is another book called Danger Forward, and that is a biography of a gentleman named Paul Gorman. Now, if that name doesn't resonate with any of your listeners, Paul Gorman was a 1950 West Point graduate, got his baptism by fire on the hilltop battles of the Korean War, where he was decorated for bravery. Stayed in the military through Vietnam, and as a brigade commander, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his heroics at the Battle of Bong Trang, which he managed to hold off an enemy Viet Cong battalion while he was being burned by napalm.
Oh wow!
Yes.
Oh my gosh!
He lived to tell about it. He fully recovered from his wounds in that battle, and after Vietnam, he became the principal architect for the infamous Pentagon Papers.
Ooh.
Oh, wow. That's why I know the name. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's
and his
amazing.
legacy doesn't stop there even, because after he was the driving force behind the Pentagon Papers, which exposed the harsh reality of the top-down bureaucratic mismanagement in Vietnam. Paul Gorman later became the commander of U.S. Southern Command in the 1980s, and Southern Command is responsible for all military operations in South America and the Caribbean. And where that is on the timeline, he was commanding Southern Command while we were doing operations in Grenada, and also when we had troops in Nicaragua and El Salvador.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. So this is pretty epic content. And then I want to know about these, these jets, these fighter jets. So you're looking at, how they were, created and manufactured, and then what wars they fought in, and who was using
Absolutely.
them. Wow.
Absolutely. And the F-14 probably has the most popularity simply because that was the jet that was featured in Top Gun.
Oh, yeah.
See, I know all about that.
Exactly. Got to leave it to Hollywood, man.
I know.
Yeah.
See, wow. This is interesting. Well, we can't wait for it. And man, so next time we talk, he's going to go, well, there's book 5 and 6. Just keeps going, keeps on rolling with it. Good for you, man. That's awesome. So everyone, again, all of Mike's books are on Amazon. You can go to his website, MikeGuardia.com, go to his Amazon page, and see the masses of books that he has, and watch for his next ones. He's also on Twitter and Facebook. He keeps people posted on all kinds of military history, especially on those two social media sites. And you can keep up with him on blendradioandtv.com. You'll see him in our expert department. And, of course, follow the Love Your Parks Tour at loveyourparkstour.com. You'll see our Mission Possible Story Series page there. And you can link to Mike's assignment to us. And as we said, we're going to be doing our Fremont map, or Fremont, the map of Fremont. I know, all of a sudden he'll haunt us, Mike. He's going to go like, you got that map wrong. That's not how you do it.
Yeah, well, it's going to be different.
He's going to argue with Google. Yeah.
MapQuest. Yeah. He didn't have any
That's
of
so
that.
funny. That's funny. All right, so, we like to play music for you, Mike. So this one, I like this song for Fremont, It's called Wheel of Destiny, because it's interesting, because you could spin the wheel and it'll have a different story on Fremont, and you're either going to like it or you're not. So I just thought this was a cool song it's from our friend over in South Africa, James Saunders. And everyone, you can keep up with him at jamessaundersmusician.com. He's on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. But here it is, Wheel of Destiny. Thanks so much for joining us, Military Mike.
All right. Well, the pleasure is always mine. Love being on the show.
Yeah, we enjoy it too. Next time, it's all about your book. So, and we'll keep you up to date on Fremont, on all the new places we discover. Here it is, Wheel of Destiny.
You're sinking sweet and slow beneath the horizon. I see you disappearing in the haze. You're sliding in and out of this dream, just a fleeting glimpse, never the same.
like a curtain call that brings me to the fall. Just one look before I fade away. Fade away. 3, 2, 1. Hey, what shooting stars may fall for these wishes heaped upon that shore beneath the sea of memories. I'll find you.